Great pleasure to welcome to What's Next Aadil Jappie, who's the SAP Retail Capability Lead for Accenture Africa. And talking about the strategic imperative for retailers, we know the massive focus on retailers who are moving to ERP for future-proof solutions. And is there a business case? What are the future trends and innovations? And migrating from legacy systems seems to be a challenge. And then, of course, the migration challenges. These are some of the topics we're going to cover today. And it's great to see you, Aadil. How are you doing?
I'm good, Aki. How are you, man? Thanks for taking the time.
No, thanks for joining us. Listen, what are the most pressing reasons for retailers to move a cloud ERP system like SAP S for HANA?
I think, Aki, if you look at the retail industry, it's probably the one industry that's most directly impacted by the change in consumer behavior, right? So if consumers change their shopping habits, retailers are the first bunch to feel that impact. And if you look at our local market in SA, the rise of e-commerce, and we all know there's a big giant that has entered our South African market, and our retailers have to respond. And in order to be able to respond, you need to be fairly agile, nimble, quick-footed. And I think a lot of our legacy in the IT industry here is that our systems are old, it's monolithic. So, when you need to make a change, it's never quick. And you need to kind of eventually move yourself to an architecture that's adaptable, agile, composable. And I think that's where cloud ERP comes into its own. Something like S4HANA in the cloud is something that will give retailers that kind of agility and ability to respond to the market faster.
It's interesting. I mean, this is all about applying technology and moving away from legacy systems. So how does cloud ERP offer that scalability and flexibility that you talk about that traditional on-premise systems lack?
Yeah, I think from a scalability point of view, I mean, it allows, like I said, coming back to that whole response mechanism, one thing is about scale, but I think it's more about response. If, our retailers want to try something new, they need to be able to do that quickly, fastly, and scale their landscape to adapt to that changes that they want to make. So, cloud is one of the things that allows that nimble-footedness. And if you need to turn something up, something you need an additional boost of, is it memory or storage or hardware? If you had to go through a traditional procurement process of your old data center model, it's a lot different with cloud that you can actually do that a lot quicker and adapt faster.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a good point. You often find many retailers are using those legacy systems, an on-prem system, for example, you don't have that kind of scalability. I mean, Black Friday is such a great example this
100%.
month, How do you scale up? When you've got the cloud, you can just say, turn a couple of things on, and there you've got that additional capacity.
100%.
Could you walk us through a typical cloud ERP migration journey for a retailer? Because when you talk about their journey, automatically people get, they're going to panic. But it shouldn't be that difficult. I mean, what are the key phrases here?
Yeah, no, and that's
phases, rather.
Yeah, if you look at it from Accenture, we try and keep this quite simple. We have a methodology that we apply to this, and the first thing I'd say, there's kind of three big steps. We call it, the first step we call sort of envision and discover. And in that phase, you're really you need to actually have a vision and a strategy of where you want to go with this. There's no point just jumping on the bandwagon. There must be something worth going for. So that should form part of your vision and your strategy. And also in that, you need to assess what your current landscape is to understand what you're going to take to the cloud and what you leave behind, because you can't take everything. It's something, it's your opportunity to actually really move what you need to move. So there's a bit of assessment and planning in that first phase. Then the second part is a concept we call realize the digital core. And the digital core, just as an Accenture term we use, it's really the most foundational core of your landscape where all the transactions would run through, your key data sets will sit. So basically you need to realize that core. And by what we mean by that is you need to kind of design that, you need to plan that in. Then the big phases of migrating the data from your old landscape into this new cloud-based landscape. And then obviously we have to go through a lot of testing and validation for that. And then the final phase is probably the phase that I get most excited about. Once you've kind of done all that and you've taken your systems live on the cloud, I think the next part is the opportunity for optimization and continuous improvement. And then also then you kind of can really drive innovation which as a retailer, you need to kind of do to differentiate yourself from your competitors. So I think that final phase, which I call accelerate business performance, that's the phase that probably excites me the most out of the three phases that we would typically go through.
Yeah, and it's a formula, right? You go through the following phases, and it's look, it sounds easy, right? But there are operational challenges that retailers could face, right, when they migrate to cloud ERP. How do they overcome these kind of challenges?
Well, firstly, if we look at what I would call out two big challenges in this journey, in this migration, if you want to call it that. One is the legacy application. So as I mentioned earlier, a lot of our retailers have a monolithical, system in the back. But not only that, they have many, many applications. So the question is, and the second part of that, sorry, is the data. Just to add that in. So getting the right data into your new cloud-based ERP system is it's not an easy task, because you're going to have to clean it up first, because, we have the saying, junk in, junk out. So if you actually don't take the opportunity to clear your data before you migrate it into the cloud, you're just going to carry a whole lot of redundant data that you probably don't need. And the same for your legacy applications, right? You need to understand what applications what we call sunset, and they won't play part of the future, and therefore what goes into cloud. So I think there's a lot of thinking that if that's not done properly, I think you will run into challenges. You could easily migrate your current problems into your new environment if you're not careful. I mean, we also use this saying, and say, it's not your mess for less, it's actually less mess that we're after. And that's really what we want to push to our clients, saying you need to think about taking less mess with you rather than the same mess in a different place, or possibly for less.
That makes sense. I like the way you put that. It makes complete sense. But, when you move to cloud ERP, everybody talks about costs and blah, 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 and, the impact costs and efficiency. How does this all moving to a cloud ERP system impact cost efficiency? Because, cost is a very sensitive issue today. And I guess providing a better return on investment in the long term, which I'm sure it will do.
Yeah, I think probably, Aki, if I have to look, this is probably the most sensitive topic when we have the discussions with our clients, right? Because the reality is our clients have data centers that are open, have been operational for 10 plus years. And that currently is obviously sitting as an asset that has been depreciated over that period of time. So when you try and do a cost comparison to a cloud versus the data center, there's a cost of the migration part before you get to the running part. Now, that's often a debate with retailers and our clients at the moment. We try to help them kind of visualize that beyond, just looking at the data center that's possibly, being depreciated over time. But the reduced costs, obviously, from an operational point of view, changes, right? Once you're in the cloud, you're starting to look at a more OpEx-based model than a CapEx-based model. So that's one thing. And then ideally, you hand over a lot of the maintenance activities to a company like SAP if it's their software that you're running. The other thing I see a lot of, which a lot of clients are starting to enjoy, is there is a good level of cost predictability once you are in the cloud, because you know what your monthly run rate should be. And when you decide to scale up, like for a Black Friday, you actually know what you're letting yourself in for before you let yourself in for it. So I think there's that. But I think the other areas that we're seeing where we have to look at the benefits beyond just pure monetary is once you're in the cloud, companies like SAP and even the hyperscalers themselves, the AWSs, the Microsoft, there's so much innovation in generative AI and artificial intelligence that you can actually leverage that to, slim down the manual effort on your business processes. You can manual task, and all sort of redundant tasks can be done sort of through automation now, because you have access to that capability in the cloud. So that is definitely a saving. The trick is obviously modeling that to make the clients understand that. And then the other thing, which is a benefit, is just getting, once you are in the cloud, you're generally faster, more agile. And sometimes just being fast to that point of value is a huge benefit to a retailer, especially if you're trying to be first off the mark, or respond to the market as fast as possible. Reducing that time is actually, reduction in time actually does mean a reduction in cost in most cases.
Yeah, very interesting. You've obviously got your finger on the pulse. So what kind of innovations are you seeing in the cloud ERP space that are specifically beneficial for retail customers and the industry itself?
Yeah, it touches on what I mentioned earlier. So there's a lot about the sort of the data element, right? Once you have your data in this core, or this digital core as we refer to it often, you have now, firstly, a single source of truth. And that's quite powerful, because once you have your single source of truth, I should say, you can then start leveraging the stuff like sort of AI-powered insights, because once you have your data, the main thing that you want to have is as much insight on your customers and your behavior of your customers. So the ability to leverage AI-powered insights, I think, is a big thing at the moment. And obviously, generative AI is the next. It's definitely a thing at the moment. So the innovation coming from the likes of SAP with Joule, is something to consider. And also, like I said, you have to also look at the hyperscalers once you're in the cloud, what they can offer you. Other things that I'm seeing is also something like supply chain optimization. Once you have a cloud-based ERP system, your access to real-time visibility of stock, how your inventory is actually being managed. You have the ability to almost react in real time and manage and react as quick as you can. So I think there's a lot in there. I think I'm also quite curious just to see how this space develops and changes, but there's definitely a lot once you have the benefits of having your data in the core and one single source of truth. I think then you start to unlock the opportunities.
Very, very powerful indeed. In what ways can a cloud ERP enhance that retail agility? You mentioned about scaling, for example, and also enabling retailers to better respond to market changes and customer needs. Because the moment you have that data and that one source of truth, the insights that you get are you one step ahead of everybody else.
100%. And I think this is where once you're in that environment, or what I mean, a cloud ERP environment, like with an SAP system, what we need to remember is that a company like SAP is continuously innovating themselves. And before, if we go to our sort of traditional on-prem landscapes, you have to kind of go through a whole patching/upgrade, initiative to get access to that new functionality. Whereas with the cloud, you can almost choose now to enable that new functionality, which could be, you may take months to develop that yourself, and SAP has kind of done it. Now you can actually capitalize on that quicker. So there is obviously a benefit of continuous innovation by your cloud ERP provider. But I think one thing, and I'm going to steal a saying from my colleague, because often we find in our sort of retail landscape, there's what we call sort of the bread and butter stuff you must do, but isn't probably any advantageous way of doing it. So I always use accounts payable as this example. You've got to get an invoice, you've got to check it, match it, and then pay it. There's no competitor advantage in doing that really in a different way. So a system like SAP gives you that opportunity. That's your bread and butter. There's no time to waste energy on that. Whereas there are things like what we call the secret sauce that makes one retailer very different. So if that's their pricing strategy or their merchandise strategy, they get the ability to focus less because they have the functionality for the bread and butter, and therefore their energy and their focus can go to the real secret sauce activities. That's where I really see it's almost freeing up the mind for the retailers to focus on what makes them special for their clients, rather than worry about the stuff that kind of should just be mundane bread and butter type activity.
Aadil, what future trends do you foresee in cloud ERP? And I guess that, you need to see these trends and forecast them, because retailers need to prepare and leverage them. So where do you see it all going?
So I think for cloud ERP, I think the first thing I think is definitely going to come about is a much deeper industry specialization, because at the moment, SAP is an ERP, and ERP generally is for any industry, right? So you can be for utilities, it could work for consumer goods, it could work for retail. And I think while there is obviously a version of SAP that's geared towards retail and geared towards perhaps utilities, I think once in the cloud, I'm betting on that there's going to be a lot deeper industry specialization of the offering, because you can leverage the learnings across the pad and make them available to the customers. That's one thing. once we have that, I think the next phase is really how we're going to drive the advanced data analytics and the business intelligence, because now you're going to be very specialized in what you do. You're going to, you're going to unlock, I think, visibility that you probably never had before. And there's no doubt that, AI and generative AI is going to play a massive role in that. So I think it's going that way because, everyone's hot on generative AI and AI at the moment. I think we're still in the infancy. So I think once we get to a more specialized view of the world, specifically to this market, let's say retail, and you know what advanced data analytics you want to drive, and I think you can enable that and infuse your generative AI in that, I think that's where we're headed. That would be my kind of guess, if I had to say, where I think we would be going with this.
Well, listen, it's exciting and it's where the future is, and one needs to embrace the future if you want to be ahead of the game. Aadil Jappie, who is the SAP Retail Capability Lead for Accenture Africa. Aadil, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights on what's next.
Aki, appreciate the time and thank you so much, man. Appreciate it.